Hey guys, I'm on an adventure at my local pull-apart junkyard today, and I decided to do something a little bit crazy, but what I'm looking at is a 1987 Z31. So this is a 300ZX, and if you're not familiar with the VG33 engine in the Nissan Xterras, they share the same camshaft and cylinder heads as the old VG30s. And so the mid-80s Z31s have a camshaft that's a bit more aggressive than the one that's in the stock Nissan Xterra. It's on par with the Euro cams that you can get from 4x4parts.com. I know that my Nissan Xterra is going to be due for a timing belt here in the next 6 months. It should be a pretty cheap upgrade, and I'm going to have the engine torn apart when I do the timing belt anyway, so I might as well dig in and see what I can get. So I don't actually really know anything at all about this engine as far as how to actually remove the camshafts here, but it should be similar to the VG33. So I know that I'm going to have to remove all of this upper intake plenum, all of these spark plug wires, and just keep pulling things out to get down to the valve covers. Hopefully I can remove enough stuff on the front of the engine and I can pull them straight out the front side of the head. But this is going to be kind of a learning process, and there's a lot of this engine that's still put together. I was kind of hoping that the engine would be picked over, but the camshafts would be pretty easy to get to. So this will be a long process. This might end up being a 2 or 3 trip project here. So this looks like it's a turbo model. There's a lot of extra piping here that looks like it goes down to a turbo and an intercooler. The nice thing about junkyards is that you can just cut through stuff. I like to leave stuff intact for someone else if I can, but this has actually been in the yard for almost a month now, and there's really not a whole lot that's been taken off of it, so I don't feel bad about shortcutting this whole process and just cutting through the wiring harness and the rubber hoses. So I was able to get the nuts off of the EGR valve here. I was able to remove a couple other brackets off of this intake plenum, which is what needs to come out. So I'm just going to keep removing anything that's in the way to get to the main mounting bolts that are kind of buried underneath that plenum. This is a little bit harder to get to than on the VG33 engine because the plenum is centered between the banks. Huh. I was actually very surprised that this EGR tube flange nut is actually spinning. There we go. Done with that. That gives me a little bit more room to get to some hoses. And you can see, I don't know why they put a hex Allen bolt right there when the plenum is actually blocking it, so I don't know how I'm supposed to get to that. So I actually just can't see because the car's up on stands in the junkyard, but there's actually upper plenum bolts right here that are easier to get to, so I think that should make things move a little bit quicker if I can remove this upper cover. I didn't bring my Allen wrench socket, so I'm having to improvise to get enough torque to break them free. Lots of hoses. If you notice the intake plenum gasket pattern here with the spacing of the runners, that's the same on the VG33. We just have a different plenum that goes over to the driver's side valve cover. But the intake manifold gasket and intake manifold spacer that I put on the Xterra was originally designed for this intake plenum. So I'm just going to keep digging into the intake and try and remove this lower intake manifold, and there's a few bolts here. And it looks like there's a few on the other side as well, underneath the fuel injectors. So maybe instead of going the brute force method, I should have just taken the retaining bolt out on each injector. That makes it a lot easier to pull out of the plenum. That'll give me some more room to try and pry this lower intake plenum out. Alright, so that required a little bit of brute strength method there. It's difficult because of the angles of the ports. And it looks like I still got a coolant hose attaching it, so that's going to make it more difficult. I'll keep that extra hose in mind on the Xterra in case they have one there too, just so I don't have to beat up on my truck as much. Hopefully the camshafts are still in good shape, but if not, I can always send them in to a company to get them reground, but I still got some more work to do. Alright guys, so I'm going to call it quits for today. This is probably going to be a 2-visit job to finish getting the camshafts out, but I got the upper intake plenum, lower intake plenum, and a bunch of the hoses and wiring cleared away. All that should be left is I'm going to have to disassemble all of the belts and the fan in the front end of the engine, take off valve covers to get to the rocker arms. I should be able to remove the backing plate on each camshaft and then hopefully slide them out the front. Might have to get rid of the radiator on the front end of the engine to give it some room to slide out, but hopefully no one else is looking for the same part, so hopefully when I come back next time it'll still be here for me.